You hear it all the time, right? Promises about high-quality support. But how do you really know? How can you be sure those promises are actually being kept? Well, today, that's exactly what we're going to dig into. We're looking at how to measure support quality, not by the words people use, but by facts, things you can actually verify.
So how do we get past the slogans, the marketing talk, and find real, verifiable proof that a support system is doing what it's supposed to do? That's really the big question driving this entire explainer.
Okay, so before we can measure anything, we have to start with a definition. What does quality even mean? I mean, what does it feel like for the people who actually depend on these systems day in and day out?
It turns out quality isn't about a bunch of uplifting phrases on a website. It's something much more solid. It's this feeling of well-grounded confidence. It's that real, tangible belief that if things get tough, if you really need it, help is actually going to be there for you.
And you can really see the difference here. On one side, you've got that well-grounded confidence. It's based on systems you can actually check. It gives you clarity, and that builds trust. But on the other side, we've got what you might call brochure hope. This stuff is built on slogans and pretty diagrams, and instead of clarity, it often just creates uncertainty and a whole lot more questions. One is solid, the other, well, it's pretty fragile.
And here's a really crucial point. When people are left in that state of uncertainty, just wondering if help is really going to come, or if it all just depends on who you talk to that day, that uncertainty, that's a failure of the system itself. It's a huge red flag that we need public ways to hold these systems accountable.
So that leads us from just the feeling of quality to a very practical expectation. If a system is working, there has to be a clear, traceable process.
Think about it. When a tough situation pops up, people don't need another slogan. They need to know what happens next. A system that actually works leaves traces, like footprints in the sand. Something gets recorded, someone has to respond, a decision gets made, and maybe a plan actually changes. These are actions, things you should be able to see and verify. They create a real path forward.
Okay, so how can we, the public, actually check for these traces? Well, let's walk through a simple but really powerful framework for doing just that, using documents that are available to everyone.
Now, I want to be really clear about our approach here. We're going to move carefully. The goal isn't to jump to some big conclusion. It's to look step by step at what we can actually verify. Sometimes the documents give us a straight answer, and other times they show us where the gaps are, what's not being measured, or what isn't being explained.
So when we say we're going to measure quality, what we really mean is running these 3 simple checks. First, is there public data? We're talking about actual numbers, not just vague statements. Second, can we compare that data year over year to see if there are any trends? And third, what does this data tell us? What does it reveal? And maybe more importantly, what does it hide?
And just to be clear, if the data doesn't exist, that doesn't automatically mean a system is failing. Not at all. But what it does mean is that it's a whole lot harder for the public to verify how things are working in the real world. And when you can't verify things, it's pretty tough to build trust.
All right, to make this all a bit more practical, we're going to focus on one specific type of document to start, a summary report on critical incidents.
So what is that? Well, critical incident reporting is basically a public system for sorting and categorizing serious events. The whole idea is to track trends and spot risks over time. It creates a public record that anyone, in theory, can look at and analyze.
Now, a quick but really important heads up. Today, we're not going to be reading one of these reports line by line. That's for next time. Today, we're just talking about why this kind of document is so important for building trust and transparency. It gives us categories, it lets us make comparisons, it gives us a language for measurement that we, the public, can actually use.
So let's just zoom out for a second and look at the big picture. Why does all of this matter? Why go through the trouble of this careful, documentary-style checking?
It matters because at the end of the day, quality isn't just a slogan. It's a practice that you should be able to verify. If a system says, hey, we ensure quality, then the public ought to have a way to actually check if that's true.
And just to be crystal clear, we check these things not because we're trying to hunt for mistakes. We check because we're talking about the safety of vulnerable people. We check so that the people who live inside this system every single day can build trust. And ultimately, we check because without public verification, there's just no way to have real accountability.
So what's next? Well, in our next explainer, we're going to take one of these reports in hand. We'll go through it step by step and look really closely at what the system is actually measuring, how it describes problems, and what parts of it can truly be verified.
We're going to dive into its structure, see what it shows year after year, and really pinpoint the questions it leaves unanswered. And all of this is to answer that one big question. What does this report actually show us about well-grounded confidence versus just polished promises?